We'll begin in Montpelier, where state lawmakers are looking to pass new restrictions on firearms, including a waiting period on purchases. It's the kind of bill on which the Judiciary Committees often ask Defender General Matt Valerio to weigh in. This morning, he's answering a few of our questions, too. Mr. Defender General, thanks for the time.
Well, thanks for having me.
You oversee public defense in Vermont. You've been at it a long time,
Right.
and you are a regular at the State House, testifying on a range of legal issues before the Judiciary Committees. Let me ask you about a couple of those that have occupied some of your time this year. Does Vermont need a forensic medical hospital in the state?
Well, I think we do.
Why?
And when Hurricane Irene came through, it basically washed away the state hospital, and we haven't had a facility like that since. We've had the clients who would be served there have been dispersed around the state into various places, and we have a small temporary hospital that's been created in the meantime, secure facility, but we haven't had what we did have, and we need that. We need places to evaluate people, to hold them temporarily until they stabilize with whatever mental health issues they have, and that doesn't exist. There are some concerns from some folks, some of the advocates, that if we build a facility, they'll just fill it, and then they'll fill it, and they'll fill it some more. The plan, as I understand it, for this is a small facility that's going to focus on the most serious cases, serious homicides, sex cases, that sort of thing, with people who are, mentally ill or developmentally disabled who have those problems and need to be dealt with in that facility. But it's not it's not a 200-bed facility where everybody with mental illness involved in the criminal justice system is going to make their way there. That's not at all what the plan is.
So we would essentially devote a wing of the new Berlin psychiatric hospital?
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and you're on board with that?
I think we need something.
What about prostitution laws? As we've seen this year, advocates push for repeal. I'm not sure how much of a thing this is, but there's a bill, Senate Bill 125. What's your take?
Well, I don't think it went very far. Not to my knowledge. We have very few prostitution cases in Vermont. There was a little kind of blip where we had a few back when T.J. Donovan was state's attorney up in Chittenden County, and since he left that office, we don't see very many of them. Again, this is one of those things that, in a way, it might be a good idea. I don't know that criminal liability for that activity makes much of a dent in, whether things are going well or not from the criminal justice system standpoint. It's to quote a former governor, it's kind of a nothing burger. It really isn't. It isn't the kind of thing that is a major driver of anything in the criminal justice system. We're literally talking a handful of cases, and maybe one hand.
I understand, but in the 21st century, is consensual sex work something that should still be against the law?
Again, from my perspective, if it's not impacting what we're trying to do, it's not a concern of mine.
Let me ask you about firearms regulation. For the last several years, the legislature's been under pressure to tighten restrictions on magazines, on possession, sale. The Supreme Court's weighed in. What should folks at home know about what has changed now?
Well, I think with the Bruen case that came out of the United States Supreme Court, the whole landscape about what is allowable from a gun regulation, firearms regulation scenario I think it's completely different. We've also seen circuit court cases across the country that are calling that are saying that certain restrictions that, for example, the Vermont has the one that Governor Scott signed, the bump stock and the high capacity magazine, right? Those in some circuit cases since the Bruen case have been found to be illegal under the U.S. Constitution. My office, again, we aren't taking a position on what is the appropriate policy. What we're trying to do is educate the legislature about what the state of the law is as it comes out of the United States Supreme Court. So when you're making a decision about whether to pass a law, you have in mind that you are going to challenge what is the state of the constitutional law now, or you're going to go along with it. Vermont, so far, at least coming out of the House, seems to want to challenge it. Even some legislators have commented that they voted for the bill knowing it was unconstitutional, but that there was, they felt there was a need to either challenge it or to, in the interim, save potential lives by doing that. I don't know what the impact's going to be, but from our perspective, what we're trying to do is educate. And I have one of the real experts in our appellate division on constitutional Second Amendment issues, and so that's what we've been doing.
Let me ask you about inmate deaths in state prisons. You automatically review the circumstances, and we've been hearing several times so far this year of inmates expiring in prison. Do you see a systemic issue here? Is this just circumstance? Is there something for folks at home to be concerned about?
Well, it might be both. I think that part of it is we changed our system during the Douglas administration and made certain crimes indeterminate life sentences. So while you have actually less people being convicted of certain types of sex crimes and the like, and in homicides in the old days, pre these changes, so you're talking before 2008, around there, people who were convicted of murder would have the likelihood of getting out at some point. People who were convicted of certain sex crimes had the likelihood of getting out at some point. With these indeterminate life sentences and mandatory minimums that were put in place at the time, you have more people being held for longer. Inmates are getting older. When they get older, they get sicker, and you have an inmate population that is more likely to die. Also in the interim, we've seen kind of an expansion of this opiate problem across the state, and we have people coming into prisons with more severe health problems than we've seen in the past. All that having been said, there are ongoing concerns about the quality of health care in facilities. There's ongoing concerns about staffing at DOC and the ability to keep an eye on everything that's going on. And all of these things have some level of contribution to what we're seeing.
Yeah. The pandemic closed the courts, and we have had unprecedented backlogs as a consequence.
Right.
Is there anything more the courts could do to get caught up? And what's the practical effect of this hangover from the pandemic?
Well, I said something when the pandemic first hit and the courts closed effectively for jury trials and any kind of protracted hearings. And when I said it, I believed it, and now I am going to admit that I was wrong. I said at the time that just because we have a pandemic, the Constitution does not get suspended. And so rights to speedy trial and the like are going to continue. And I was wrong. The Constitution was suspended for 2 years. And we didn't have trials, and we had people being held in jail, and we had people who were, by the time we're done with this, we're going to have 6- and 7-year-old misdemeanors unless something is done. Now the court can eventually any particular judge, or ultimately the Supreme Court, if cases make it up that way, say, no, we really do have a speedy trial requirement under the Constitution, and some number of cases can be taken off the docket.
But that's not Valerio's only concern. Many of Vermont's public defense attorneys are aging. He says he has 5 openings today, and hiring new talent is tough, especially for work in Vermont's rural counties.
I think there's a couple of issues going on.
Okay.
One is that overall, and people won't believe this, but overall, Vermont doesn't have enough lawyers to cover the amount of legal work that's out there, whether it's public defense, prosecution, AGs, private sector, and particularly in the rural counties. That's not unusual for rural states around the country, but Vermont, it's particularly an issue because we have an aging demographic in our bar. Lawyers are retiring, aging, and we're not filling them in with new lawyers. So the pool we're drawing from of licensed lawyers in Vermont is shrinking. The other thing we're dealing with is, for the most part, in the region, private lawyers are doing well. So if you're coming out of law school with $200,000 in educational debt, you're going to take that job for $150,000 or $200,000 right out of law school in Massachusetts or Connecticut or New York, and even in the southern New Hampshire region, before you come to Vermont and be a public defender for $60,000. That's just economics.
Can you hire anybody at $60,000?
I haven't been able to hire anybody entry level for over 5 years. We have to go kind of up the pay scale a little bit just to get somebody in the door. But I think there's also something else going on with what is considered public sector or work. When I was first DG, if I had an opening in Chittenden County, I'd get 100 resumes. And now when I advertise, I get 4 or 5. I talk to people who apply for the jobs, even the small number that we do get applying, and they talk about what public interest work is. When I was coming up, and 25 years ago, if you wanted to do public interest work, you wanted to be a public defender, or you wanted to work for legal aid, or for an advocacy group. Now the people coming out of law school are thinking about, if I want to do public interest work, I want to be a prosecutor. I want to work for the Attorney General's office, or I want to work for the EPA, or to get the bad guys, so to speak. And so the concept of public service work has gone from representing disadvantaged and people who are caught up in the criminal justice system to wanting to get the bad guys. And that's a shift in mentality. And so the available pool, again, gets shrunk. The biggest...
You see that changing?
Not right off.
Yeah. That's scary to you?
It's scary to me every day. Because we have the same thing going on in the public defense system that you see in the bar as a whole. We're aging. I have some of the same, a number of the same lawyers when I started 22 years ago are still with us, doing contract work, doing staff public defense work, and they're now, they were 40 years old when I started. They're 62 now. When I started the job, I was 37. I'll be 60 this year. We're all getting toward the latter part of our careers, and I don't see people coming in to fill that void. So we've been reaching out more, like going to New York to these law fairs, going to Massachusetts, and targeting particular law schools that are known for producing public defenders. But it's difficult to talk those folks into coming here. And fundamentally, what we're hoping to find is people who want to be in Vermont first and want to be public defenders second. And in the rural counties, it's even more difficult. I could probably do okay if I were just hiring the Burlington-Montpelier corridor, but if I get into the rest of Vermont, it's much more difficult.
Mr. Defender General, thanks very much for the time.
No problem. Thanks for talking.
He was appointed by Governor Howard Dean in 2001. Now that Valerio is in his 6th term. Next, the new federal provision.